Round 1, fight 5. I'm losing track. Jaime Lannister versus Perrin Aybara. Now I can already hear you guys. This isn't the one. I thought that was next. I thought I was gonna go down here. I know, but I want to finish up each quarter before I move on to the next one, and I want to get as much time as possible before I reach the last quarter because I need to read books before I get there. So we're gonna finish each quarter before moving on to the next, at least getting it down to the final 4 by the time we move on. So that's cleared up. You understand the situation. I did not double check which mic this is recording from. Let's get into it. So we have the 7 categories going in. We have origin, development, role, interests, relationships, who would win in a fight, and the tiebreaker, who would do better in each other's world. First things first, origin. Both these guys do not have the most original or best origins from their respective series, but they're both solid on their own merits. Jaime Lannister, born into the richest family, wealthiest, depending on what you account in for wealth. Not to get too spoilery, but the Lannisters have their issues. And basically becoming a corrupt who has some very likable qualities. I'm more and more falling on the I don't like the Jaime side of things. Like, he's great as a character, don't get me wrong, I love him as a character, but like as a person, I hate him. But for a while I was kind of, whatever, getting into the origin, and he has 2 siblings, a father, and really just kind of is the face of his family in a lot of ways. He's known as the Kingslayer and all of these things, which has led to him being held up as a pariah within Westeros. He sleeps with his sister, he fights in battles, and he, you know, does Lannister things. That is kind of the setup, the basis, the incredibly shallow version of Jaime Lannister's origin. Perrin Aybara, on the other hand, is quite literally the polar opposite that a person could be from Jaime Lannister. He is a humble blacksmith from a small town, a not famous family in any way, shape, or form, and is really just the apprentice who got caught up in the massive journey that is the Wheel of Time. He has a large family, all of which, no spoilers, things happen with, which leads to him being someone who really cares about others. He is a very empathetic person. While he is the gentle giant character cliche, he executes it beautifully, and it makes sense that he turned out the way with the backstory and origin that he has. He's not a blacksmith in the burly I'm so manly sense, but more in the he loves crafting and creation sense. Really an artist in its purest form. I have a really big soft spot for Perrin, even though his character becomes insufferable at times. I think overall he's a joy to follow. These two's origins really clash and collide. For me, it just comes down to execution, and unfortunately bias is going to come through here and give Perrin the point for me. That's because I like walking through a character's origin with them, and I think we get a little bit more of that with Perrin, having the real village start. Meanwhile, in Game of Thrones or A Song of Ice and Fire, we never start with Jaime. He is introduced to us as an established who he is character, who does develop a lot later on, but his origin is never fully fleshed out for us. It's more of just we're told what happened. So for that reason, Perrin Aybara gets the first point over Sister Diddler. Spoiler alert from here on going out. I've tried to avoid them, but they're just going to be in this video. So if you haven't read either series, click off if you want to. Next up, we have the character's development. Who develops more as an individual between these two? That is very hard to say because both of them change a lot. And once again, it's very different development for these two. Jaime Lannister is kind of put down, put in his place, and beat around for a while, which develops into him being a slightly more humble, down-to-earth person, but not entirely. Meanwhile, Perrin Aybara is elevated upwards. He is kind of hailed as this king, the Wolf King, Golden Eyes, Lord Perrin, something he really does not want. So really what's happening to them and their reactions to it are entirely differently. Jaime's having his eyes opened and beginning to see the world clearer, and Perrin Aybara is being elevated against his will to this higher level status. A very interesting clashing of development. I love how both of these characters develop, and I think the execution of them both is marvelous. That being said, with the amount of development that happens with Perrin and how detailed and intricate it is, I have to go slightly leaning towards his way for this point. It's just because Perrin Aybara's development spans 14 full books, and he actually has a rather large amount of the series devoted to him, and the real arc of his story is his development. It's the most important part of his character, is turning into the final stage that Perrin reaches, and so for that reason, I'm giving him this point. It's just incredibly hard to beat Robert Jordan's devotion to development. It's what drives his stories, really. It's the heart of his series, and for that reason, his characters will almost always win it, in my opinion. Although Jaime Lannister is pretty close, because George R. R. Martin is a genius of character development. Next up, they have role they play in the world they are in. Perrin Aybara is an integral part of the trio, and if something happens to him, we as the reader know the world could end. The refounder of Manetheren, the Wolf King, and someone who is a huge contributor to the last battle. He is one of these stone pillars standing against the shadow, and without him, the light would have lost, period. But more importantly for the reader, he's a more down-to-earth character for us to follow. While Rand is going off essentially becoming a god, Perrin is the character that really reminds us of the humanity of the world around us and really gives heart to the Wheel of Time. And for that reason, I'm going to give him a massive leg up here. But Jaime Lannister has his own special role as well. Jaime Lannister begins to provide as a moral guide for how bad the Lannister family can be. Seeing his kind of role to support his brother and seeing how wrong his family has become, and also kind of turning his back later on a little bit on some of his previously held beliefs, and eventually becoming to resent his sister, more so portrayed in the TV show, really becomes interesting. And I think the way he's able to expose the moral ambiguity of a lot of what's going on here, and maybe the redemption possibility for the Lannister line down the road, is so well executed. I think half the reason Jaime Lannister's character works as well as it does is how amazing his role in this world is kind of subtly shifted to the reader. George R. R. Martin made him so likable even though he's so bad, so that later on you can really see as he begins to hesitate and his eyes begin to open just how monstrous the Lannisters can be. If you're scaring away one of your own, one of your worst, Jaime, then how far down the rabbit hole is your family really gone? That being said, once again, I'm gonna give the leg up here to Perrin Aybara. I just don't think it's a fair comparison because how massive his role is and how much more integral a part of the series he is, and the execution is just as good as Jaime Lannister's. Once again, he's gonna steal the point here from Blondie. Now we have interest for the reader, and it's time for Jaime to make a comeback, and you all know why who have read The Wheel of Time. Jaime stays interesting no matter what is happening with him. He is someone who is always in high-stakes situations, whether it's actually physically in a battle or kind of morally and spiritually in a conflict with himself. Jaime holds your attention. He really does. He's spectacular to follow throughout the series. Meanwhile, Perrin, there's a slog. I've mentioned it before, I'll mention it again. There's 3 books that happen with Perrin where there's a couple high-stakes scenes, but otherwise it's just painful to follow. And for that reason, Jaime Lannister easily sweeps away the interest point for the reader. Next up, we have relationships, and once again, Jaime's going to come back swinging hard. Perrin's relationships, well, he has a very interesting one with himself and his fear of the wolf inside of him and all of these things. His external relationships, especially with his love interest, fall flat for me. I don't think they're executed well, especially by Robert Jordan's standards. I don't think Perrin's relationships are what drive him in any way, shape, or form, except for that internal one, and maybe the one with Aram, but that resolves itself so quickly and so suddenly, I can't give it as much merit as maybe some people think it deserves. Meanwhile, Jaime Lannister's relationships are gross, original, and incredibly integral to who he is. George R. R. Martin makes relationships really one of the big moving factors behind his series and propels the plot, and Jaime is no exception to that. Whether it's an enemy or a lover, the relationship established there is so clear and so perfectly executed and consistent. I have to give this point to Jaime, mainly just because this is, in my opinion, is where George R. R. Martin shines brightest. It's in the relationships between his characters. Finally, we have who would win in a fight. As I established in my last video between Perrin and Vin, once Perrin can get you in the dream world, it's over. And Vin is much faster, stronger, and more magical than Jaime Lannister ever was or ever will be, pretty definitively, and I think Perrin might even be able to defeat Jaime with just straight up combat. He is the mountain level strength, power, and aggression coming in here. He's ripped apart men with his axe and hammer like they're butter, like it's a piece of cake. He can take down Aiel, Myrddraal, and Trollocs, really no problem. So for that reason, Perrin Aybara does get the fight point as well. Now we have who would do better in the other's world. For me, this is going to go to Jaime pretty clearly. Perrin is just too innocent and simple-minded to really ever thrive in Westeros. I think he would eventually succumb to poisoning or something like that. Even if he did just leave society and join with the wolves, that's not exactly doing too great. Jaime, on the other hand, is proficient in backstabbing, all kinds of games of houses type things that are prevalent in the Wheel of Time, and I certainly think he could make himself a presence within the Wheel of Time that would actually have to be reckoned with. He could certainly get a following, especially within these zealot groups. So for that reason, tiebreaker goes to Jaime Lannister. I actually think this is the most interesting comparison I've done, and purely because of how different these two are. I know I've said I've compared very different characters before, but I'd like you to try to even think of two characters more different than Perrin Aybara and Jaime Lannister. It is an excruciatingly large difference between these two. I hope you guys enjoyed the comparison in the video. Like and subscribe if you have not already. I hope you're having a wonderful start to your week. Let me know if you're excited for the next fight. Let me know what fight coming up you want to see the most. I could maybe bump it up and have it coming sooner. I hope you all are having a wonderful day. Like and subscribe. Hit the Patreon if you want to support the channel and what I do here. Peace.